We're going to talk a little while here this afternoon about a subject that is on, I think, everybody's mind, regardless of their political affiliations. And the more we look at it, the more significant it seems to be. In fact, the more frightening it seems to be, and that is the simple situation with our economy and the level of what the government is doing in the spending money department. This, of course, ties into the job situation in America, the many people who are looking for work, some of the businesses that are struggling, and the families that are struggling as well. All of it's tied together in the economy, and it is also, of course, tied to the federal government and its spending. So what I have done here is I'm going to try to paint a picture in simple terms. Sometimes economists make things seem a little bit too complicated. This doesn't have to be so complicated. In fact, the less complicated it is, the more frightening it becomes. And so what I would like to suggest, first of all, is I'd like to talk about some words that we use in Washington that maybe aren't familiar with everybody here, particularly some of our freshman members. And the first word is entitlements. Entitlements, I'm an engineer by training. And entitlements you could think of as a machine. In fact, it's a little bit like those machines in the bathroom that you put your hand in front of them and they spit out those brown paper towels, you see. Except the entitlements that we're talking about here spit out dollar bills. And what happens is a legislature, maybe 30 years ago, created some bill which automatically gives money to certain people that come and put their hand in front of the machine. And these entitlements, the biggest ones are Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. Those are programs that have been around for quite a while. But they're a little bit like that if you think of them as something that spends money automatically. So those of us here on the floor of the Congress, we talk about whether we're going to fund this or fund that or how we're going to run the government. That these things were created a long time ago, and they just keep on running and spending money. And those are called entitlements. Now, there's another thing that's like the entitlements, and it's the interest on our debt. When the U.S. government issues a Treasury bill, the Treasury bill is supposed to pay some interest. So it's a little bit like that machine. It spits out some dollar bills. And so it being like an entitlement is something that's spending money. Now, here is the thing that I think is frightening, and I think you'll think it's frightening as you give this a little bit of thought. And that is that if you add up for this year, this isn't sometime way out in the future, but if you go just this year, you add up the Social Security, the Medicare, the Medicaid, the other entitlements, or some other smaller entitlements, and you put those together with the interest on our debt, that comes to $2.2 trillion. Now, I don't know what $2.2 trillion is in terms of trying to visualize the money, but it's very easy to visualize this. And $2.2 trillion is also the total revenue that the federal government brings in taxes. So that makes it easier to see. In other words, these entitlements and the interest on the debt, $2.2 trillion, is the same thing as the revenue that we get in from taxes. Now, why is that frightening? Well, it's because it doesn't include two other things: the defense budget and the what's called non-defense discretionary. So what are these two things over here? Well, the defense budget's pretty obvious. Obviously it's tanks and airplanes, it's ships, it's men with rifles, and the national security. And that's a piece of that. You can see that's almost $700 billion. And non-defense would be things like the building that we're in. Be the Capitol building, it'd be the federal parks, it would be the federal prisons, it would be the Department of Energy or Commerce or Justice or Education, all those different government things that we spend money on, that's in this non-defense. So in other words, if you want to balance the budget, today, what do you have to do? Well, what you'd have to do would be cut defense to zero. Not one soldier, not one rifle left, not one uniform. Cut that to zero. That's not enough. Then cut all the rest of the stuff the government's spending money on. Close this building down, close the Capitol down, close the Senate and the House down, close down the federal parks, close down all of those different departments of commerce, justice, and education, and energy, and all those things. Close them all down. When those are all zero, you now have a balanced budget.